Hello, good afternoon, everyone. How you doing? Hi there. I'm behind you. Hey. Thank you so much for coming out today. You're probably wondering what the hell this is going to be, and so am I. I want to start off talking about assumptions. Now, when you walked into this room, you saw a bunch of chairs facing this way. You saw a stage set up there with ATX and a little screen with something projected on it. So naturally you sat down facing this direction, assuming that that's where everything would happen. Whenever I'm in the writer's room or sitting behind a laptop by myself in my solitary, self-loathing, self-doubting existential place, one of the things I always challenge myself to do is to try to shed as many subconscious assumptions that I have. It's incredible if you think about it, if you really sort of spend any time concentrating on it, how many things you bring to that chair or to that room that you aren't even really aware of unless you put a great deal of thought into shedding yourself of that. But the way that I want to start off is if you've got a piece of paper or you have a phone that you can do notes on or text a message to yourself, I want you to pull that out right now. All right. So I want you to take 1 minute only. I don't want you to think about it. And this is not an exercise in being clever, it's an exercise in being honest. I want you to write down or type out the 1 or 2 things that you are most afraid of.
In general or in the creative process?
In general. Because the things that you're most afraid of in general are the same things that you're most afraid of in the creative process. The title of today was Truth and Dare and Fear. So what I need right now is 4 volunteers. Okay, you man. And just make your way up to the stage and sit at one of those chairs. The couch can fit 2. Let's have you. Okay, you sir. All right, what do we have? 1 more that we need to do here? Let's see here. I want to mix it up a little bit. Let's have you. Okay. A little applause for the daring among us. Okay, so when you talk about one of your fears being you don't want to waste time, now you're someone who's been working for 5 years on a screenplay, right?
One thing.
Yeah, so your fear is directly, you are actually putting yourself in a place of constant fear because you're saying every day that passes I've been working on this fucking thing for 5 years is another day that I've wasted. Now that's not necessarily true because 1, you're only 21 years old. To put it in perspective, I didn't write my first screenplay until like your age plus 4 or 5 years, okay, before I even started one. You're directly sort of sitting down at this computer every day and saying, I can't get to the next one until I finish this one.
Right.
Right. And I find sometimes that like, especially for writers, there's this perverse sort of masochistic tendency we have to take the thing that we're most afraid of, i.e. wasting time, and like it actually becomes your friend. And you sort of latch onto it like a pit bull. I don't know why I'm doing this, if my analogy is a pit bull. Because when you are grappling with that fear, you feel naturally and rightfully in an honest place. And you need to be in an honest place in order to write something good. So whenever you feel the most uncomfortable, whenever you feel the most afraid, you feel like you are really grappling with something. However, the flip side, the B side of the record to that is it can also be paralytic, I find, right? And that's the constant thing that I feel like I'm managing, and I know that when we're in the room and we're really hitting a wall, like how do you tap into your fear without it becoming the thing that's stopping you? How do you let it be an accelerant? How do you let it be something that is actually sort of lubricating the process as opposed to grinding it to a halt with its own friction? All right, so the fear of not realizing your full potential, can you root that in something? Is there something that you've worked on professionally or in your own life that you feel like, I just sort of like Mr. Ramsey in To the Lighthouse, like I'm at R, but I can't, I'm at Q, but I can't get to R?
Yeah, well, I could pick one. There's a lot. But I'm a writer as well, and
let me pause for one second. How many of you are writers in the room? Oh, nice, a lot of you. So there's a lot of angst among these four walls right now. Okay, go ahead, Eric.
And yeah, started out as a playwright in New York, and then moved to Los Angeles 10 years later, and it's been,
yeah,
this is one of the, actually.
Let's talk about when you started writing that first play.
Wow. Okay, so I was living on 2nd Avenue in New York City between C and D, which back then was kind of Wild West.
The Wild East.
The Wild East, that's right. And it was a one-bedroom apartment, and I shared it with this guy who was a dancer. Really great guy. Would come home, my laundry would be folded and stuff. So it was like sitting up and.
I love that your first descriptor for why he was such a great guy is that he folded your laundry. That says a lot about.
I've never had that before or since, so it stood out. But yeah, he was a performer, so he had that energy, but from a completely different discipline. So I just remember that somebody who's basically sharing everything that is in the house is also a creative, but from a completely different discipline. And he worked his ass off to, make sure he was physically and mentally prepared. And he performed with this dance company, Jane Alexander, I think it was, back in New York. Got a wow from somebody. He's a big fan of Jane Alexander. So I would sit there and I would write, and I would always do it late at night because I felt like all my defenses were down, and it was like, well, nothing's going to come at you because you're sitting here and it's 2 a.m. There's not going to be any phone calls.
How long did it take you to write that first play?
I want to say about 6 weeks or so, maybe 2 months.
And did you have a community of other writers and actors in New York that you had befriended? Did you hear it out loud? Did the play ever make it to the stage? Or?
Yeah, it did. I was at Playwrights Horizons before it is what it is now, wow. But I was like taking acting classes and taking writing classes at places that I had heard of, and they would have sort of like festivals. They'd be like, oh, we're going to write, and then your project's going to be in this thing. So if you wanted to be part of that festival, you had to obviously have a finished piece, and then you'd meet actors along the way, or you'd have casting sessions where you didn't know what the hell you were looking for, but you knew it when it came.
That's a great motivator, a deadline.
Yes.
Right? All the writers in the room understand that. Hey, the festival's coming up in June, better finish this play.
Yeah.
So you did hear that play out loud?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that first play and hearing it out loud, when you had handed it off, were you working with the director who
Yep.
directed the? Okay, so when you handed it off, and I'm sure you had discussions with the director and the actors and all of that, but there's a moment where you're sitting there, it's completely out of your hands, and was it just a table read, or were there other people in the room?
I was in it, and it got performed.
Oh, you were in it?
Yeah.
That's I can't even conceive of that's. Yeah, okay. All
Still
right.
not sure if that's a good idea or
not. To be in your own thing. I have so much respect for people that are able to act their own material. Okay, so you're in it. So you not only have the experience of hearing your own play in front of, there was an audience.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're hearing your own play in front of an audience for the first time, and also performing in that play in front of an audience for the first time. Can you take us to that? Can you describe that?
One of those rare moments where you're like, this is all happening, and trying not to say it's going great as you're doing it, because there's that's when it's not going to go great. That's when it goes straight down like a twisted metal fireball into the ground. But it was a very much an energetic kind of thing, and I remember learning a lot from doing it. Like, you have no control over that part, so don't worry about that, or you have a very strong opinion about that, so make sure that if you can, get that done. And those kinds of decisions, it really helps to do that when you don't know what you're doing, because there's no other way to know what you're doing other than to jump into it.
But you got to a point where you're sitting in a room full of people hearing this thing out loud, and it's almost difficult to imagine that there was a time when there was nothing. And I definitely have experienced that many times, where I would be on set, and so take that and magnify it to there's like 70 people running around with all sorts of equipment, and people have set up like a catering thing over here, and there's all these trucks outside and people doing makeup and all of that, and you're rolling cameras, and you've got, holy shit, Kevin Spacey's saying this thing, and you know that it's going to be broadcast, and all these people around the world are going to see it, and that seems ludicrous. It seems crazy that that's even possible. All right, let's move on. I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 11.
Okay.
Pick a number.
7.
That's the number. She already got it immediately. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. 7-11. I guess I didn't bring my imagination today, did I? Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. Can you think of a moment? I mean, in Nashville, aside from reading on some Facebook post about camping or something, but a moment, an evening, or a stroll, or what have you, where you're like, oh, this kind of is the most alone I've felt here. We've got all day.
Yeah, that's fine. I remember it, but it was a Facebook post. Is that okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
It was it was Easter, and some couple friends from here posted a picture of the 4 of them, and then this new couple. At Easter, they had done Easter together. You know where I'm going. And they were like, oh, wonderful to have Easton with the Austin family. And I'm like, and this was year 2 into me being in Nashville, and I was like, I want to die. I miss these people, not literally, okay. But I miss those 4 people so much, and now they've kind of replaced us with these 2 new people, and they're just having this great time. And I was like, and we still, in 2 years, we still don't have that here. We don't have anything even close to that here, And my parents were closer to us in Nashville, but they're, they've got their own life, and we don't.
So what did you do?
That. Moved back to
No. In that moment, you read this Facebook post. You're feeling pretty shitty and alone.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you did next? I mean, did you walk away from the computer and go and fold someone's laundry? Did you go to the batting cages and No. No, I mean,
that would have been nice. I think immediately I posted something on there like, I miss you guys so much. But I think I don't know. I guess I think once it got to that point, 11 months in or whatever, that I was just sort of almost resigned to it. And
do you think that was the moment that you were like, you know what, I need to go back to Austin?
Yeah, I think honestly, it was about 3 weeks later that my husband was really getting down about the job, and his dad, he misses his grandkids too, and so he's been calling around. And I said, would this all get better if we just moved back to Austin? And he's like, yes. So 3 days later, we decided we were coming back.
And did you mention that when you were having that discussion? Did you mention the Facebook post?
I didn't, and I think I said, because I wanted it to be more, just the logical job thing. I was thinking, I was like, oh, I get to go back to my, my friends, and with friends who want to be around us and that miss us too, and love the kids. We came back, and the house was supposed to be open for us. Our new house was supposed to be open for us, and then it wasn't. And so I just called a friend. I'm like, hi, the kids and I need to come to your house for about 8 hours. Here we come, And I could never have done that in Nashville, but first day back in Austin, I could immediately do that.
All right. First of all, how many people like to camp? All right, you're all gonna friend Alyssa on Facebook, and you're gonna have a big camping trip together. But Okay, let me ask, how many of you feel like you've had an experience similar to that one in whatever, I mean, yeah, okay, most of the people in this room, and not necessarily I'm saying social media or, you know, that you read something and felt left out, but that moment of being excluded, that sort of aloneness, I think, is such a universal one. And, you know, what it makes me think of is, you know, I'm thinking like the television show that is your life, and I'm thinking like, you know, it's amazing to me sometimes how the smallest things can be the most dramatic things. Like the real moment of drama in the story of moving to Nashville and contending with loneliness, if loneliness is the subject of this particular TV show, is that moment of just looking at this Facebook post, which, you know, if the story is told right, could be the most heartbreaking and dramatic moment of it. I'm sorry? Did someone say something?
I think it was a call.
Oh, okay. I was like, did I just make that sound without even realizing? My biggest fear is insanity, right? But you know what I mean? Like, that's the sort of thing, when I was talking a little bit earlier about the universal things that connect us all, that moment, like, I just, like, there's like 15 things popped into my head where I'm like, I have sat in that exact chair. It wasn't in Nashville. It wasn't looking at a Facebook post. It had nothing to do with camping, although I am an Eagle Scout, mind you. I was like, I get it. I can feel that, you know? And I think that when you tackle something, and this is where like fear and truth come into play, no one wants to go back to the place of being alone if you can avoid it. Right? But when you're writing, when you're in the room or you're sitting behind that computer by yourself, you're willfully saying, all right, I am going to go back in my body to the place where I was sitting in front of that Facebook post. Now, I might not even be writing about Nashville or a Facebook post or anything like that, but I'm going to go there on purpose. I'm going to walk down that dim hallway in order to take that and bring it to whatever story I'm trying to tell now. Because if I can tap into that, honestly, as shitty as it feels, and bring that to the page, then that is going to connect with the audience, just as it connected with all of us, in a way that is compelling. Okay, all right, so I must know, what, without thinking about it too much, what is the most embarrassing way that someone can die? In your...
Well, without getting fantastical, I'm sure I could create something.
Get fantastical, too, yeah.
I think anything drug-related is embarrassing.
Okay.
You know, like, and there are just, if you're dying in a drug-related situation.
I thought you were going to say something like run over by Segway. You know, like.
No.
I'm like, drug overdose, that's sad.
No, but see, I think of embarrassing more from like a personal standpoint, like something that, I guess it's personal failing and poor decision making leading to death, as opposed to something absolutely ridiculous happened, because that can just, you have no control over that.
Right.
For me, what it was specifically was I was 18 or 19, basically the same thing, and I was in a bikini, driving back from the beach with my hair in pigtails, wearing flip-flops.
So embarrassing. Okay.
Well, driving my best friend who had just gotten into medical school. And I just didn't look when I was merging, and we flipped the car over, and there wasn't anyone coming the other way, but there could have been. And next thing I know, I'm upside down, like time really slowed down. And I just remember turning and looking at her and thinking, wow, if I kill this future doctor, how embarrassing.
So, do you feel like dying in an embarrassing way or killing someone in an embarrassing way, to try to like take it to somewhere like that I can understand, and hopefully these folks can. To me, that seems to have something to do with, like, you have a sense of self, right? And that version, those events, do not align with who you see yourself being.
Certainly not who I'd want to be, right?
Right.
All the other, got good grades, went to a great school. And then in that one moment, I just didn't check my mirror because I was like, I want to listen to this song. Like a
Right.
complete, just stereotypical jackass. And I was like, let me just merge. And then, boom.
Right.
So, yeah, it was like, and then, you know, if I were in the papers, it would be like, blonde girl in bikini flips car.
Yeah.
And nobody
What's-
would know anything.
What song was it?
I think it was Cascada. It was something very au courant that
Yeah.
was not translated past that year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, but I think this is incredibly terrifying. Like, you look in the mirror each day, you have a sense of what your own personal narrative is, who's staring back at you, the things you've done, the things that you want to do, who you've been, and who you want to be. Right? And we're constantly in a process of editing that for ourselves. Like, we choose to focus, or sometimes involuntarily focus, on certain memories, certain aspects of ourselves. There's others that we, you know, if I were to sit down with you for a half hour and say, tell me your life story, there are going to be things that you leave out on purpose, and other things that you leave out just because your psyche has sort of said, I need to wash that down the drain. And there's going to be certain things that you sort of foreground. And what is always fascinating to me is how little we actually are who we think we are. If someone sort of just filmed you all day long without your knowledge and you then watched it, you would be, I think, surprised how many times throughout the day you defy your own expectations of yourself and who you think you are. And for me, the creative process is about finding those contradictions. It's about amplifying those contradictions, because none of us really are this one clean, edited narrative. We're a jangle of things that most of the time don't add up. And great storytelling is about picking and choosing things. I had a playwriting teacher who told me that all a play is the most interesting 2 hours of someone's life. Right? So what 2 hours do you pick? Is it one 2-hour stretch, or is it 120 1-minute slivers? But that embedded in that is going to be moments that actually don't align, that are paradoxical, that are in direct conflict with each other in terms of who that person is. That's what makes the characters interesting. It's what makes all of us interesting. So in a way, like, you are who you want to be, but you also are the girl in the bikini that wanted to change the radio station and could have killed your friend in a terrible way.
And somebody else.
And sure,
Other
throw
people,
someone else into
yeah.
the mix. Why not?
No,
Doubly
I mean, the
embarrassing.
people in the other car, anyone that was coming the other direction, I mean, a millisecond in any particular different way could have...
Right, so like, the terrifying thing is being both those people.
Right.
And really neither. You're not one or the other, you're both at
Right.
the same time.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, to sort of wrap up here, because we do have to stick to the convention of schedule. One of the things that I always find, like, my biggest fear, it's only fair that I share it, is so obvious, it's death. It's the first thought that I have every morning. When I wake up, or I'm sort of in that half dream state in the process of waking up, every single day without fail, my first thought is, I will die. To me, that's a liberating thing, because how can it get worse that day after you think about that? But aside from that, it actually puts everything in perspective. 20,000 years from now, it'll be snowing here, and 1,000 miles north of here will be under a mile of ice, as the next ice age descends. 8 months from now, Donald Trump may be president. I mean,
Let's not bring it down that low.
The apocalypse can happen at any moment. But you sort of think like, well, New York City, where I live, in 20,000 years will be buried under a mile of ice. In 4.5 billion years, the Earth will be consumed by the sun. 94% of the universe is dark energy and dark matter, which we can't see or measure. So, we may actually just be the salamanders crawling out of the ocean, while higher beings are, looking at us the way that we look at pigeons walking down the street. All of the bullshit and things that we find ourselves wrapped up in a day-to-day basis that are the source of our frustrations and pettiness are so meaningless in comparison to all of that and the inky black void of nothingness that we will all submerge back into when our time is up, right? That's my first thought each day. But it actually, because to me, if you're talking about truth and you're talking about honesty, the only one true thing I think any of us can all agree on and be certain of is that that's how all of our stories end. But the amazing thing before you get there, and it's something I think about all the time, it's why I live in New York, and I get the vibe from Austin too, is, I'll ride the subway car, and I can look at anyone on that subway train, and any one of them could have an amazing movie or television show about them. I used to have this recurring dream starting when I was like 4 years old. I still have it sometimes. I'm on a tennis court. I did not know how to play tennis when I was 4 years old, but in my dream somehow I did. And I'm on a tennis court, and the tennis court is surrounded by nothing. It's just black. And I can really only see my side of the tennis court and the net, and on the other side of the net, it's kind of hazy. And there I am, my little 4-year-old self, and even to this day, still in the dream, I'm 4 years old. And this tennis ball comes over from the hazy other side of the court, and I hit the ball, and it goes back over, disappears into the haze. And then, a few moments later, coming back over the net is this massive ball. It's not a tennis ball, it's just a massive ball of all of the matter in the universe, right? And so imagine like all the matter in the universe, that's a lot of matter, and if it were a big ball, which means it's mostly just gonna be flat, from the way you see it, because the bottom is, it's really big. And it's just slowly, at like this speed, coming back over the net, and it's sort of making a sound like that. And just as it's passing over the net, and I'm standing there with my tennis racket, the dream starts over. And it's about a 5-second dream that will just occur like several thousand times in a row before I wake up. And not to get like too Freudian or whatever, or psychoanalytical, but the enormity, the overwhelmingness of all that is possible and all that is both terrifying, but it's also, there you are on center court playing the game. You're in it, You've got the racket in your hand. You're ready to bounce it back, And to me, I guess, being able to wake up with that fear, live with that fear, make that fear my friend, is what keeps me honest, or at least I hope it keeps me honest, which is really what creativity is all about, is just trying to be as honest as possible. The great playwright, Nobel laureate Harold Pinter said that language, I'm butchering this, but language is mostly our strategy for obscuring the truth. That it's what we do and how we behave and what's between the lines that really shows us who we are, and that language is our way of lying to ourselves and others. But on rare occasion, whether it's the words that characters say in moments of drama where that lying is punctured by truth, or how the language of what they're saying leads to behavior that punctures the language with truth, it's all about honesty. And getting there means walking through that fear. And that requires a great deal of daring and courage. I want to thank you for being daring and courageous enough to come up here. Yeah. I wish we had time to do this with all of you, but that would take a couple months. And thank all of you for being so open and welcoming to something that's a little different than the normal fare, and for really being warm and generous to these folks. So give yourselves a hand of applause.